All right. So here we are, recording live from Cannes. Amazing. We had such a great meetings throughout the week. I'm happy to be here with a close friend and someone that I admire a lot, James Miles from Brooks. James, why don't you introduce yourself?
Morning, great to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm the marketing director for Brooks Running, American performance running gear brand. And it's been a great couple of days with you already.
What have you seen so far at Cannes?
I think the highlight for me yesterday was Mark Pritchard from P&G. Saw that on the main stage, saw some really interesting insights on how to build brands for the long term. So things I'll definitely take home with me.
Interesting. We're going to touch on that. So why don't you start telling us a little bit about your journey? And fantastic.
Well, I'm English originally, as maybe you can tell from my accent, but I've been living abroad for about 15 years. I started in marketing in, the very, very late 90s. So very, very long time, pretty old now. And I met you in 2010, 2011, I think, when I moved to Germany to work on the Korean car brand Hyundai. So I spent a few years in Germany. And then I moved to Amsterdam to work on Heineken and started working also, this was on the agency side, started working with ASICS. And that was my transition into the performance running business. So I joined Brooks in 2018, and it's been a roller coaster ride for the last 7 years, building a very, very strong global brand.
Interesting. Let's start with your background, because I think you have always been working with media planning,
Yep.
advertising. Tell us a little bit the evolution of that. What have you seen? And probably there's a lot. We could be covering this for a week. But what have you seen? What has changed dramatically in your experience?
I mean, when I started way back when, it was a direct marketing agency. So I was really focused on driving outcomes from what we did for our clients. It was the very, very start of digital back then. So there wasn't much in the way of targeting opportunities. It was more like the old way of media planning. And then we started to get hold of data and different ways of reaching consumers based on knowing more about them. So it's changed a lot since then, just having, going back to TGI as an example, a way of targeting audiences. Then we got a lot of data. We're able to target people based on their interests, their behaviors, where they're from, what they've been doing. And that's obviously accelerated massively in recent years to what now we can get super, super precise, reaching the right person, at the right time with the right message. So that evolution's been extreme over 25 years. So it's changed a lot. And now we have a lot more opportunities, a lot more different options in how we can reach consumers across different types of media touchpoints.
And given that we are here at Cannes and it's a creative festival, how do you see this connection of data signals? How do you map your audience and delivering the right message to these different audiences?
Yeah, well, I guess it's complex is the short answer, but we target different audiences at different stages of their shopping journey. I'm in the running business. I'm looking out for consumers looking for performance running gear when they're in market. So that's the kind of way that we segment the audiences in market versus not yet in market, or pre-market is what we call it. And they're very, very different types of targeting within those different buckets. We can see lots of signals coming up from people looking for performance run gear. Searching on search engines, searching on Amazon, we can retarget them, we can look at their behaviors, we can look at lookalike audiences. That's only a very, very small portion of our overall total addressable market. So they're the kind of two media plans, if you like, those that are in market, driving right now short-term sales impact, and the total addressable market, which is obviously a lot bigger than those, usually about 5% of the audience that are looking for your product right now. Then we reach them in very, very different ways with much broader targeting and different types of media. We've gone back into TV, for example, in the last couple of years, working very, very effectively for us. But that's over a much longer term horizon. Does deliver some short-term sales impact, but we look at a much longer time horizon for driving return on investment from that kind of activity. And the targeting's very different. It's much broader.
Yeah, there's so much here to unpack because I want to cover a little bit audience, but I also want to piggyback on something that you mentioned about this trade-off of short-term results and strategies to, fill the funnel at the bottom and also not lose sight on the upper funnel. What's that balance, in your opinion?
Well, I think a lot of brands and businesses lost the balance. Talking about that journey before, going through that 20 years or so, people got super, super focused on the short term because you could track it, you could measure it, you could target it. a lot of us maybe went too far into that short-termism. And that has a detrimental effect on your brand building capability for the long term. So we're really trying to readdress that balance and move back towards, some of the best practice you see from the IPA and Les Binet and people like that is the 60-40 rule. Mm-hmm. Should be investing around 60% of your resources in building the brand for the long term with emotive long-term storytelling, and the other 40% on the short-term immediate sales impact. We're not quite there yet, and we're on a journey towards it, but that's a big step towards that in the last few years, and that's what I was talking about, going back into more broadcast, less digital channels, which helps us address that balance and get back to talking to a broader audience to get into their mindset when they come back into market. When they next think about buying performance running shoes, I want them to be thinking about Brooks. And that's a very different kind of plan and approach and set of measurement tools than it is to the short-term, immediate sales-driving stuff, which is oftentimes very digital-heavy.
It's interesting. And then going back a little bit to the target discussion we were having and how to use the data signals that are available. Amazon provides a lot of data through AMC, so for brands that are looking for that balance of how to focus on the lower funnel, but also invest on the mid and upper funnel, AMC is a great tool. And Amazon yesterday released this very interesting study, probably the biggest on, and it's very provocative because it shows that the traditional target based on demographics is kind of outdated. There's so much more data signals that can be used. How do you see that?
Yeah, I thought the research was super interesting and honestly not really very surprising for me because they're long-held beliefs that I've had. So it's good to see some data behind it. I think, targeting demographics or, generational cohorts like Gen Z or millennials is almost a little bit crazy, to be honest. Think how broad those audiences are. I'm a millennial, believe it or not, just about. I'm one of the oldest ones. But you look at them, me, the other end of the scale, there's people that are in my team that are in their 20s. Nothing like me. They have no kids. They're not married. They're living at home still, some of them. So to put us in the same group makes zero sense. And the same goes for all this fascination with Gen Z right now. You've got the oldest version of a Gen Z, again, in my team, in their late 20s, employed, has spending power. And the youngest end of that is like the example of my nephew. He's in school. His mum and dad still buy everything for him. So to target them with the same kind of messaging or the same kind of media makes zero sense. They have totally different media choices, totally different behaviors, totally different lives. So I think that kind of cohort clustering makes no sense at all for any brand or business. You get a bit smaller within that in terms of just demographics. Demographics has some use in terms of exclusions. So you go back to that, Gen Z broad audience, I would never target a 14-year-old. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be able to buy a 150 plus pair of running shoes. And the same goes for any other exclusion audience. It's pretty useful for that. Also useful for analytics, looking at which ages within a certain group are working for you and not working for you. But there are much richer ways to target and segment audiences. Clustering around interest, clustering around behavior is much more likely to get you a like-minded set of audiences that are going to perform better for any brand and any product, in my experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we have this conversation a lot with clients in which that would make sense. Like, it's still valid. You still need to classify customers based on demographics and age and so on. But, back in the days when we were buying TV ads and radio ads, that was the way to reach an audience. You were looking for that scale. And now with Amazon Marketing Cloud and all the other signals that you get from your campaigns, you have a much richer set of data to be more precise on your efforts.
Yep.
So those engagements become more relevant exactly because you're more connected. And if you can bring that last mile, which is the message, as you were saying, it's completely different to target a older part of that spectrum or a younger part of that spectrum. So that's where I see a lot of value on that study, and I'm super excited to take a look in depth on the data, and this will help me a lot on my day-to-day.
I think it also helps with creativity, right? When you start to think about different audiences based on their interests or their likes or their behaviors, you can get sharper in what you actually put in front of them. So it's not just about who they are and what they're into, it's about the message that you give them from the brand as well. You can be a lot more relevant rather than just targeting a demographic or an age group. There's not much richness to that to brief the creatives to be able to say, let's really resonate with this audience based on something much more tangible and interesting to them.
Yeah. And one of the things that fascinates, Brooks in particular is the way you guys are challenging the dominant players in the industry. And as any brand that it's challenging, a challenging brand, you have limited resources and you have to be more creative. You have to use better the data. There was a little bit about that mentality and what other brands that are not the dominant or the leading in their categories, what they can learn from you guys.
Yeah, being a challenger is always really interesting because you have the limited resources challenge. You have to be very diligent and disciplined in your strategy. So we make choices every year about what we do and what we don't do, broadly as a business and within marketing as well. And we have to place our limited chips in the places that make the most impact for us. So there's a lot of test and learn that happens within that. We fail sometimes and that's okay and we learn from it, but then we pivot and do different things. So I think it's about being very, very strict in your strategy, making the right choices and then sticking to them. So that's a big part of what we do. And also it's just doing things in a much more frugal mindset potentially than some of the bigger brands I've worked in the past, where we make our money work harder for us. So we really, really focus on things like targeting and getting sharp with that to eliminate wastage where we can and be a lot more efficient and more effective with those limited euros, dollars, pounds that we have. So I think it's a slightly different mindset in my experience of working with bigger corporate, bigger brands. You have to be really, really on the money.
Yeah. Oh, I hear you. And then given that you have to maximize your resources, how do you leverage the learnings from one channel to the other using your past campaign results?
As much as we can, but it's tricky. It's particularly tricky with some of the big platform players where you don't get as much access to the data you want to see. They're a bit kind of walled off, or a lot of these new kind of AI-led solutions where you just don't know as much as you used to in terms of targeting groups, measurement on those different groups, or targeting options. So it's getting a bit more opaque, which is, I think, very challenging for the future. But where we can, we absolutely do. And we have 14 different countries within my remit in Europe as well. So learning cross-country is quite an interesting opportunity for us because sometimes we do a test in some of our bigger markets, see how that works, then roll it out to the other markets in due course. We do a lot of cross-channel and cross-country, cross-market learning.
Wow. This interview wouldn't be complete if I didn't touch on the hottest keyword in the market right now. How do you see AI playing a role in your position and to your strategy?
Well, I mean, it's going to play a role in everyone's position and strategy moving forward, for sure, no doubt. We're doing a lot of testing with different types of platforms for, let's say, efficiency plays. Creatively, still challenging for us to make it work with running shoes. A running shoe on body is very hard to artificially recreate, but we're still testing and learning. I mentioned some of the targeting options that the big platform players use, and it's working really well. Honestly, we just don't know exactly what within it is working really well. Yeah. And that's what I find challenging as a direct media planner of old. I like to know what's working, what the tests are doing, and what's not working, but we're not getting that. So I think the future there is concerning, but I think is going to be a challenge for us because what's the role of in-house media teams for me? What's the role of our agency team? If we're just going to put it all into a black box and let the machine decide, the role of media planning is probably going to change quite a lot. There's still a lot of outside AI opportunity as well, which makes me feel good as an old school media planner. But I think there's a lot more to learn from this. It's going to shape the future of everything we do, no doubt, inside and outside marketing.
Fantastic. This has been super insightful. One last question for you, and I want to pick your brain on your old performance media background.
Taking me back.
Yeah. How do you use, or what would be your recommendation for brands exploring those tentpole events to drive more sales? And this is going to be very tactical, but we have the second half of the year ahead of us with so many great opportunities. How do you feel that brands can explore those dates to get a leap on their market?
You think about Black Friday and sales
Black Friday
events?
Yeah.
Really good planning, in my experience of being on the brand side now, is getting really far ahead of it and planning exactly what you're going to do and what your discounts are going to be and not going to be. Importantly, for us as a premium brand, we'd prefer not to be discounted, to be honest. So for us, it's not that big a moment. But for brands where that's very important, I think it's about planning and then having a really, really, really strong team there to execute that on the day, before the day, however long you go into Black Week, month, or whatever it becomes. But it's getting longer and longer. It's just a sales holiday. Yeah, it's about really, really strong planning and super tight execution. I think that's not just for that day, that's about anything that happens. But when there's that really big moment, there's a lot of focus and attention on it, and there's this demand surge, you need to be ready to capture that if that's what your strategy is.
Amazing. What are your plans for Ken? What do you have on the books for this week?
Catching up with a lot of old colleagues, meeting some people I used to work with a very long time ago. So I'm looking forward to that a lot. I'm going to catch some of the Festival of Creativity as well. I've been here quite a few times and I've not really had time to do that before. So I've freed up my diary to do that today and tomorrow before heading back to Amsterdam.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was amazing.
Great to be here.
All right. Thank you.